Welcome everybody to our Coaching from the Stars series. We've been saying today that one of the things we thought would be interesting to explore was our thinking around money. There's a number of us here that have been exploring that over the last week or two, so it may be that kind of leaning into that we see some more insights, or we talk about something that might be helpful to you. So Noki is going to kick us off just with a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll riff from there and see what happens. Thanks, Noki.
Hey everyone. Um, what a rich topic to dig into. You can go dig into our minds about money. Everyone's favorite topic. Or not. Some people want to avoid it. What is money anyways? We got this currency. That's what most people, I suppose, think is money is. Um, what what is our ideas of money? What notions do we have, or what beliefs do we have? What is our relationship with money? I'm just posing some questions for, just for people to kind of um, contemplate on that a little bit. Here's a thought. It's like, the Federal Reserve in every country creates money literally out of nothing. Creates. Do we create money? We all create money somehow. What is our ability to create money? Is money just a form of paper? Today, it's a digital number, really. Like, I hardly carry any cash on me, really. A street person asks me sometimes which I change, and sorry, I got no coins. I had this, we were doing this exercise with our coach one day, and we were talking about money. What is our ideas about money? Or actually, what is our history on money? What is our past relationship with money? And I actually didn't want to go there. I don't want to be there. That's old. What's my relationship now? What are my thoughts on money now? And the thought that came up is like, I like to issue an IPO. That is the greatest wealth creation vehicle, at least in the Western part of the world, there is. More millionaires and billionaires have been created through an IPO than all the laborers in the world trying to make 10 bucks here and there. And what is an IPO? It's an idea. So what are our ideas about money? All of us are creative. It's like a thief is so creative in how they can steal stuff and create money by stealing other people's wealth in exchange for some other level of wealth. Some people's idea of money might be writing a book or producing a film or baking some cookies. But what's the narrative running in our heads about what money is and isn't? Because that's what's driving our ability to create money. I'm, totally see that in myself. It's like, gotta work hard. I work 50 hours a week for 10 hours, $10 an hour, or 20 or 50 or 100 bucks an hour. I'll tell you, that's the long, hard way of making money. And I'm worn out. I'd like to create ideas of how can I add value to this world? What am I offering to the world? Because that's what I'm being compensated for in the end, the value that I add to the world. How does Elon Musk become almost a trillionaire? Maybe he's already there. I don't know. Well, what value has his companies added to the world? I've had the privilege of being with some very wealthy people in my life, and some extraordinary people that are, like I chum with a billionaire, I don't chum with them, but kind of listen to them. They never talk about money. You talk about ideas. How can we do something? What can we do right now that, a million people would be interested in? They don't sit there counting the pennies at all. You just know that whatever value is going to show up at some point. No, they'll get into the numbers at some point, because that's the nitty-gritty stuff. But the idea generates the possibility for the creation of wealth. And the greater the idea and the greater the service it is to humanity, the greater the possibility of generating wealth. That's leverage. How does a bank make money? Leverage. 100% leverage. They loan out $1 and loan $20 based on $1 that's deposited. They make 2%, 5% interest on that. Well, what would you have to make on $1 to get 5% interest on $20? 20 times the amount. What percentage? Well, let's put it differently. Let's put different math. What rate of return would you need to make 5% on $20 if you're starting with $1? I know, double digits at least. I know in stock markets to make double digits, you're a pretty damn good stockbroker or stock investor at really high risk. Bank puts hardly any risk in. It's the other thing. The money's easy for them. And all of us have leverage too. Look at our intellectual capacities, skill capacities, our creative capacities. The thing is, we just allow other people to tell how little we should provide to the world. And then we should only get this fraction of the wealth that's possible out there. Well, why do we accept that? I remember when I was growing up, the phrase my father would have like, "What do you think? Money grows in trees?" And I thought about that in my later years. And says, "Yeah, it does actually." You know how? Well, you see that tree, they chop it down, they pulp it up, roll it into some paper, print some president on top of it with some arbitrary number. I don't know, let's put down 2, and you got your $2 bill. That's how they made money on trees. And then we all say, "Oh, great, money." I believe that's money. But being a Canadian, I'll tell you that having traveled to South America or other parts of the world, they look at my funny money and say, "No, thanks. I'd rather have the American bills." Oh, well, we'll take it, but we want a premium on that. 50% would be nice. So, some arbitrary number that, makes sense for them, makes no sense for me. Why is the same goods? I just need to have more Canadian dollars versus American dollars. Who made that up? So what's our relationship with money? That would be my question to anyone out there interested to kind of pose their question, to answer that question.
There's certainly a lot of thinking about it. That's what comes up for me. So much thinking about it. And to your point about being able to print money or where it comes from, like, or the fact that actually most of it is now electronic. Like, yeah. I think the thing I've seen as I've been exploring this topic recently is, oh, like, isn't it meant to be something that lets you get something you want? Like, I haven't really, it's really obvious when we say that, but I haven't seen it that way for a long time, I think. So for me, like, what I've seen is, oh, well, if there's something I want, then actually I might go and get some, and then I might actually go and do something with it. But this idea of how do you create it from what it is that you do, like that for me, I think is a new thing. Like in my world, I was always used to kind of going to work to get that. And now I've kind of navigated to offering services to do that. And that's, yeah, that comes with lots of barriers in my mind. But I have seen lately that, well, I've written on my wall, I think the barriers, thought. So I get the fact that most of it is thinking, but yeah, thinking shapes what we do. And so, yeah, be it, there's certainly a lot of thinking on this topic, I think. What about anyone else? Like, this is, yeah, I've seen some things lately, but keen to see more.
I'm seeing a lot just listening to Noki there. We are exploring money this last couple of weeks, but I'm wondering a bit like, have I a neutral relationship with money? I don't live my life as money as my God, and I don't have any thinking about money. And then as I'm listening to Noki, I'm realizing, no, that is thinking about money, that I don't live my life with money as a God, that I'm neutral about money. It's all thinking about money. So the fact that I think I have no thinking about money, and what I've written down, a few things. One is, it's one thing knowing that it's thought, but tonight, this evening, thanks to listening with a quiet mind to Noki, I now see the thought. I always knew it was thought, but I now see the thought. So thank you for that. I also wrote down idea equals money times 10, whereas good work equals money times 1, or even times 1 plus a small markup. So that in and of itself has given me an idea. I was taken very much by something I read in the British newspapers this week by an ex-Tory minister, Steve Baker, who lost his seat. So he's now gone back into the private sector in consultancy, and he has set up a consultancy business with a professor, and they're helping businesses deal with beliefism. Now, if you've never heard of beliefism, don't worry. Steve Baker and this professor have invented it. And what beliefism means, people who are so wedded to their own idea and views that they can't see anybody else's idea and views. Now, I don't know if it needs an ism attached to that, but the branding that they have put around this aspect of beliefism, the business that they're going to get, helping businesses in the private sector deal with beliefism. Number one, I think it's a brilliant idea. And number two, it's an idea that has left me jealous that I didn't think about it myself. And a last point, Noki, money doesn't grow on trees. My father used to say that as well. And I think if I had told him it does, because the trees turn into money and the money is printed on, or trees turn into paper, the money's printed on the paper, I know I would have got a good scalp around the ears for making that remark. So those are my three observations. And I thank you genuinely for helping me see the nature of my thinking around money.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? To think of the different multipliers that exist at different points. I think I like the equations that you shared there because, yeah, there's some huge multipliers if we think of different companies and how they work and the whole IPO thing. Jen, what was on your mind?
I think what I was reminded of when Noki was talking was that my specialist subject in history when I was studying that in my final year was poverty and politics in 20th century Britain. And the very first thing we did in our first seminar was have a whole discussion on what is poverty and look at how that definition had changed over time and how it would change depending upon what location you were in and what society was saying as that. And it's only now, with the benefit of hindsight and looking at it from this understanding, oh, we were pointing at our judgments and our just thoughts and how our thinking dictates the world and how we perceive it. And although I come from it from a poverty perspective, the same thing's true from the wealth perspective as well. We make that up. We will all have our independent ideas of what's a lot of money, what's a little bit of money. And that again may change in context, what you're willing to pay for a cup of tea or coffee, depending upon which part of the world, etc., you're in, can vary drastically if you were to compare it for, I don't know, the same amount of money that you're talking about if you were buying a car, for example. Different amounts will seem like a little and a lot, and we're just making it up. It's still the same numbers either way. And I'm beginning to see like John was saying, oh, it's just our thinking. It's not the truth. It's just how I'm interpreting. And there are beliefs in there that's just habits of thinking that I've thought a lot about, and I've done a lot of thinking around money and what it means. If I had a lot of money, what might I do then? And had made up a story. Oh, well, obviously, if I had a lot of money, then I would do all this stuff that I wouldn't want to do. So I've very quickly gone, oh, yes, I can create money, but I won't keep it hanging around. But what if it can be my friend instead? So that's where I am with that.
Yeah. Seeing how much is thinking and seeing how different everyone's thinking is. Like there's something in that, isn't there? I see Edwin and Dennis, I think, both perhaps ready to say something. So yeah, either of you, what's occurring for you?
You know, what's coming out for me is that money is what we make it to be. Because I'm going back to the time of the pandemic. And I don't know about you guys, but in this part of the world, toilet paper was money. You know, alcohol, water, that was money. And now this situation with right here in Florida, in Tampa, you see these long lines of people trying to get gas and water right now. Money is not the issue. It's just what we make it to be. And you can put a name to it. We just happen to call it money. And then we have stories that we've learned, that we've adopted as ours about money. And we never question them. And you know, so this exploration with Michael right now, and this relationship about money, you know, for the longest time, I thought I had a pretty neutral relationship with money. You know, just me and cash, hanging out, no drama, no strings attached. I wasn't chasing it. I wasn't obsessed with it. I was good. That's what I thought. And then we start to explore. And this unfucking relationship with money. And as it turns out, money and I have had a little something going on all along. It was like, you know, that friend who you claim is just a friend, but deep down, you kind of hope he will invite you to a dinner, to a 5-star restaurant sometimes. And when he doesn't, then you're kind of very low-key disappointed. That was me and money. And on most days, I used to think I'm the cool one in this relationship. I don't make any big fusses about it. I'm not glued to my bank account. I'm not checking every cent that I spend. I don't worship it. I don't hate it. I'm like, hey, money, I see you. Cool. You do you and I'll do me. But then every so often, that little creepy voice, right? That says, hey, if you only have more of it, imagine what you could do with it. Those sneaker whispers, you could travel more, or you could hire a full team, or you could buy a bigger house or your dream house, or help, your family and friends and all the other things that you think I can do if I have more money. And I start to live that in my mind, and I'm living my best life, just if I had that more money. And for a hot second, I actually believe it. And then that neutral status turns into the silent rebellion against my own finances. Like, money, why aren't you coming through me more of it? We could be doing bigger and bigger things if we work together. But here's what really has hit me, and I can feel it, is that the whole story I tell myself about needing more money is just that story. One that I made up in my head. And the kicker is, it's not even my story, and it's not even true. So that has me right now reveling into myself, into my own thinking. And if I'm being quite honest, sometimes it is easier to blame money for what I think I cannot do, rather than owning the fact that I'm already enough as I am. I can get stuck in the idea that the money is the golden ticket. We just have more, life will be better, I'll be unstoppable. But then the thought comes up. And what if I intentionally flip that script and realize that I am unstoppable right now without my thinking around money? And the spoiler alert is that I am.
Yeah, I felt that one. Thanks, Edwin. Like, yeah, like this idea about how much we blaming this imaginary thing for what we can't do versus actually is there something else going on like there. And as you were talking there, I was reminded of that kind of the phrase like comparison is the thief of joy. Like that kind of is so kind of came up for me there, thinking about, yeah, how much of it is our own wishes or wants or thinking, or how much of it is thinking
Yeah.
it's something else. Dennis, what's coming up for you in this conversation today?
I think for me, the money has, and I know I'm not alone in this, money has always been attached to self-worth. And I think something like that was coming up during Michael's, or maybe self-concept was what it was. Self-worth. And one of there's a couple levels that I live on when I think about money. So back in the early 80s, when I was a university student, I took my first summer job with a theater. My degree is theater, speech, and communication. And I typically was the person who was behind the scene, building shows, running shows, and that. And I loved doing that. And I took a job working for the local theater for the summer, and we were contracted per show. And the contract was $400 per show. And that not only include being there, running the show at night, being there for the rehearsals at night, but also being there during the day, building the shows. And one of my good friends or the gentleman who was a stage manager at that time, who would become one of my good friends and become my mentor in stage managing, said, Denny, he said, what you're being paid, don't add that up. And he said, it'll just upset you. And of course, you don't tell a child, don't, and sure enough, I looked at the number of hours I was working and did the math on that $400 per show. And it came out to roughly less than $1 per hour in the end. But looking back, compared to so many other jobs, projects that I have done in my life, the element of the people that I was around and the people that I was working with and the energy that I was working with, and knowing that even though it was only $400 per show, I was still taken care of by those people because we were a community. And because all of us made that thing called a show happen. I think there has never been a more comfortable aliveness and time in my life as that time when I would build those shows for so little money. And I didn't think about money. Matter of fact, I could probably say most of my life has the thinking about money is trying not to think about money. Yeah, everybody gets it. and I had a really, really rough time many decades later when I would divorce. And so this would really flip how I saw money, how I saw my self-worth, and that I would divorce my first wife. We had 2 children. And in the States, and I'm from Michigan, we have in the court system this thing that is called the friend of the courts. And they help with the child system and making sure that the money is being paid, the child care is being paid towards the to going to the children. And the thing that you are told, you have to take a class called SMILE, Start Making It Livable for Everyone. And the thing you're told is that you work with friend of the court, which they are friends of the court. They're not your friend, by the way, just so you know, if you don't know that yet. They're friends of the court. And you're told, one of the first things you're told is that if you have a change in your job circumstance, report it right away. Okay, good. We're all working on the same page there. And so in the factory that I was working in, I'd actually moved out of the floor and was working as a designer and had moved my way up to the vice president position during that time. And every time I would change position, I would report, and then they would take a little bit more money out of my paycheck because I had gone up in my position. And then the owner of the company decided to sell to somebody else. And those somebody else's decided they no longer needed my services. So I went from a vice presidential pay to down into unemployment. And so I reported it. And they looked at, and so it was like $365 a week is what you get for unemployment. And they looked at me, they looked at that, and they looked at what I was no longer, or what I used to make, and they said, well, because you used to make that, you're going to continue to pay that, which was a pretty high level. I mean, more than that 365 a week. You're going to continue to pay that. And I'm like, wow. And they just look at you like, this now is your problem. This now is your problem. It's not our problem. It's not our job. We're friends of the court. We're not your friends. Almost, you look at it and you perceive this gotcha look on their face. And of course, I mean, the inevitable is if you don't have a sustaining job, and especially if you don't have one that brings you back up to the level of what you were paying before, eventually they're going to come visit you. And one of the things you know about is that when you become in arrears, that's what they call it, they send the police to pick you up and they bring you to jail any time of the day at night. Now, you're not arrested. You're taken into jail. And I remember sitting watching a movie one night because I was in arrears, but there was really nothing I could do about it. I didn't have the money. I just had the unemployment, and I remember sitting watching a movie with the lady who would become my wife that I have now, and we've had a 20 plus year relationship. And we were watching Rob Roy, and there was a knock at the door one night, and I got arrested and I got put in jail because I was in arrears. And I have never been able to watch Rob Roy again since that night. Because every time I think of Rob Roy, I think of being in arrears. I think about not having money to be able to take care of myself, not having the money to be able to take care of my kids, and being in a position that opened myself up to losing my freedom when they came and took me away. And so you go from that community feeling to that alone, that traumatic feeling. And of course, we know where it's all at. It's here, but I still it's like, why did I take a course on fucking my relationship with money? Because every time I hear that word, So I am working on that. I don't have an answer. I just know that all those images go through my head still whenever I think about money, and it just, yeah. Go back to the times that you enjoy, and definitely start looking at what is more valuable to you, your time or the dollars you make. Oh, and a fun resource if you like reading, and I suggest listening to it as a audiobook. There's a book, I believe it's called Debt, and it's about the money system of the United States and where it began. And it talks about what's known as the modern money theory, I think is what it was called. It's been a few years since I've listened to it. And one of the things that I took away from it, it's always kind of swum around in my head, has always been in my head, is that when you hear the American arguments about balancing the budget in the United States, it's worded in a way that makes all of us think about sitting down at our table with the family or with your spouse or whatever and going through the checkbook and seeing where everything is. What they say in the book is, here's the difference. Balancing the budget is different for the creator of the money, which would be the federal government here, versus the consumer of the money, which would be me and everybody who creates goods and sells their goods for it. And they said creators create money. You pay taxes to fill in what they spent already. So it's an interesting book. It's an interesting read or interesting listen. At any rate, that's all I have to say. Thank you for putting up with my long-windedness.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, it's I was reminded there, like, yeah, the different times of our lives and how we think about money differently. Like that came through, and actually when we do and when we don't. Like I remember going from like being a student to my first job, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like, and then suddenly you stop thinking about it for a while, and then almost it becomes like oh, but actually, like we deserve more, and then there's lots of thinking about deserving and moving, and then I think to come full circle, like when I got to maybe like a couple of years ago when I started volunteering and got no money for the things I was doing, but really got lots of fulfillment from that. Suddenly it was like a complete switch, and actually there's a new question about, well, actually, do I need that? Or actually does fulfillment come from something else? And actually that, yeah, I think that's been an exploratory topic of the last couple of weeks about, yeah, are we creating that sense of fulfillment from our own thinking or from what we're receiving? John, I saw you come off mute there. Did something come up for you in that?
What has come up is what you've just talked about there in terms of the different stages of life and thinking about money. Everybody has thinking about money. I think that's natural. Listening to Dennis, if anybody deserves to have more thinking about money, it's probably Dennis. Totally understandable if it's there, So I think, as I said earlier, it's one thing knowing that you're thinking about money. It's another thing seeing exactly what that thinking is. And then I wonder, and does seeing help? And I think it does in terms of helps understand. And when you understand something better, you can relax a bit more. And when you can relax a bit more, then maybe the thinking can drop away a bit, and you can tap into your creative wisdom a bit more and come up with one of those IPOs or ideas that lead to an IPO that brings us back to the millions that Noki dangled in front of us at the start of today.
Yeah, I think there is something, isn't there, about noticing, like we've said on this call a few times in the past, like there's a power of noticing, and it sounds like we're all facing into, like sometimes that can be difficult, but actually it does bring awareness and insight. I was talking to somebody today actually who was talking about it can be useful to think about life as in what season are you in? And like I thought that was quite interesting to kind of reflect that, yeah, it's all thinking, but actually it does change depending on where we are on that journey. I'm wondering, looking at the time, like, okay, did you want to close us out and just kind of reflect on anything you heard or anything you'd
Yeah.
leave people with in terms of a question as well?
Sure. I'm going to pose a couple, what I would consider coaching questions. We're not going to answer it here. We don't have the time, obviously, but who would I be without my money story? Who would I like to be? Or who would I like to create? How could I create wealth? What's that story? It's easy to dwell in our past. Man, I'm good at that too. But who would I be without my money story? Or who would I be with a wealth story? Just different ways of phrasing things. If any of us ever imagine what it might be the next person who created, I don't know, let's just say a perpetual energy machine, what that would mean for the world? So that's the only thing I'll leave it at.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as we've said on this call, our stories shape us, don't they? Or we take action based on them, our thinking or our stories. So yeah. I love the inquiry, like what story would we like to create? Like there's a different energy to that. So yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.